In this tutorial video, I'll be covering how to do a very basic pickup for a game. So something like a gold coin or a health pickup, that kind of thing. This is what this tutorial video is going to be. So first off, right click anywhere empty in the content drawer and then click blueprint class. We're going to make an actor for this and I'm going to name it BP pickup, but you can name it anything that makes sense for your game. So once we open this, we need to add two things. So we need to add a mesh, just so there's something in the world that the player can see, and then also a collision to detect when the player gets near to that. So if I do add, and if you've got a special mesh, so a health potion or a custom coin mesh that you have, you can put in a static mesh. Okay, so that's something from a 3D modeling software. But for now, I'm just going to do a cube so we can see it represented in the world. So once we have this cube, I'm going to scale it down a little bit. So just put it to what you think might be in the world. You can change this blueprint at any point. And then what we want to do, if I put in a collision, so we could do a box collision or a sphere or capsule. It doesn't really matter which one as long as it encapsulates the mesh. More often than not, games use a sphere collision for stuff like pickup. So I'm just going to use this for now. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag this sphere radius on the right to something just a bit bigger than the pickup. So again, I can change this at any point. So if I don't like how that is, I can make it bigger or smaller. So just for ease of reference, when we get into the code of it, I'm going to rename this. So you can right click one of them and do rename, or you can slowly double click and it lets you rename. So I'm going to do player detect and then pickup mesh. So I'm just going to rename them, those two. What you need to make sure is that the player detect is a child of the pickup mesh. So stuff like doors, you don't want it to be a child, so you want to do it to the default scene root and then attach, and it'll be separated. You won't see a drop down. For stuff like a pickup, we want it to be a child, because what we're going to do, we're going to encode, make it bob up and down, and also rotate around. So we want the player detect to follow wherever the pickup is currently. So once we've got those two things, we're done with this part. So let's go to the event graph. I like to delete those. You can just leave them there. If they grayed out, they're not going to run. So what we need to do, we need to click on the player detect, so the sphere collision that we have here. Go into the event graph, scroll all the way down to the bottom on the right menu, and we'll see one called on component begin overlap. So if we click that, so in some cases you would need an end overlap, but because what we're going to do is when the player walks onto it, it adds to a score or something and then deletes this actor, we only need begin overlap. So what we need to do, other actor, drag off the blue little output node, and then drop it somewhere. And what we want to do, we want to cast to the player character. So if I do cast character, I know because I'm using the third person template that the character is called BP underscore third person character. This is something if you've got a custom game or you've got a different template, make sure you know what the character is called. So the character is, when you play the game, who are you controlling? So which blueprint are you controlling? I know for the third person, it is third person character. So I'm going to cast to here to make sure it is just the player that is being detected as overlapping this pickup. And then for the purposes of this, I'm just going to do destroy actor. So we do need to do another thing, but we're going to put it in between this. So we need to set something up in the third person character blueprint. But for the purposes of this blueprint, this is all you'll need. So we need to do something to add to a score. So if I compile that, save that, just so I don't lose it, and then if I minimize this, and then I find where the third person character blueprint is. So I know it's in third person, so content, third person, blueprints, third person character. If you're not sure, you can just search character. So go to content, so it searches all of the folders. And if you search character, we'll wait for that to do. If you search character, it'll come up with everything that has the name of character. There we are, so it's loaded. So it brings up everything, but I know BP underscore third person character blueprint class is the one that we need. So if we open this, this is the player now. So you've got all the controls. What we need to do we need to add a variable for a score. So if I go to the left, variables, press the plus. So I'm going to say this as score. If you want to have yours as currency or any other name, just put it as a name. And by default, it puts it as a boolean. Now, a boolean is a true and false, so we don't want that because we want to be able to keep a score of something, so numbers more often than not. So there are two types of numbers that are commonly used. So there's integer and float. What we want is an integer because that will give a whole number. For instance, if you're getting a gold coin, you can't have 0.81 of a gold coin. You either have one or more of a whole number. Float would be stuff that allows for a smooth movement, so we'll be doing that for the bobbing and rotating of the mesh. But we want integer to keep track of score, and things like health are also done in integer. So if we change that to integer, what we then need to do, compile and save, and then we can reference this from other bits of code, in other blueprints, so in the pickup. But what we also want to do, we want to just have a quick way to test if this score works with the pickup. So if I right click in the player and I do an event tick, so an event tick is something that runs every single frame of the game. So you've got event tick and event begin play. So event begin play and event tick are quite common unless you're using custom events. Begin play is just the first frame of play, do something. So this is to set up things like menus and all that kind of thing, and spawning of enemies in a level. Event tick is something that you need to get referenced every single frame. So because we're just going to do a debug of this, so just to check what the score currently is, we're just going to do it on a tick. We won't keep this in the final game, but this is just to test if it works. So if you drag off this arrow and type print string, it'll come up with this. This is a very common way to do what's called a debug. So you can test if something's working, what the current values of things are. Because what a cool thing is, usually if you try and drag a variable of one type into a variable of another type, so for instance up here, I can't drag in an integer to the target itself. But with a string, it usually lets you convert any variable into a string, which then gives whatever that value of the variable is. Another thing that I like to do, because if you don't do this, you'll just have a string of numbers going on the left when we play. So what I like to do the drop down to get to the advanced options and change this duration to 0. This will just mean it's one static number that's getting referenced in the top left. You'll see it when we play though. So we're going to get a constant reference to what the score currently is for the player. So once we've got that, compile, save, and this is everything we need. So we just need to go back to BP pickup. And then what we can do, because we're cast into the third person character, we can also access things within that third person character blueprint. So if I drag off as BP third person character and search whatever we called that variable, so I called mine score, we can get score. So this is a very easy way if your pickup just increases the score by 1. So I'll show you the quick way to do this. So if you get the reference to the score and then do plus plus, so the plus plus symbols, if you do increment, this will increase it by 1. So then so this then will work as a pickup that indicates a +1 to a score. So if I go back to here, put this pickup into the world, play the level, we can see at the top left there, it now says 1. So if I play that again, you can see it says 0. If I go to here, it says 1 now. So that's how we do it if we just want it to increase by 1. If we want it to increase by a certain amount, so if you've got a health pickup that heals you by 20 health, if you've got coins that give various different numbers, what we'll need to do, we'll need to delete this plus plus, we still need this get, but what we also need is a set. So a get and a set, link that up. So what we want to do, drag this all the way over there, and then what we need to do, we need to get whatever the number of the current score is, and then do a plus. So you'll do an operators and add, and then link that up to the score. So currently, the score will be whatever the score currently is plus 0. So we need to put in a custom number. So if I do it by 6, it'll show you that it does it properly. So get whatever the current score is plus 6. So with this, if I have 3 pickups, it will be score is currently 0, plus 6, set it to 6. Score is currently 6, plus 6, score is set to 12, and then so on and so forth. So I'll put a few in to show you what that looks like. So I'm just dragging these in. So 6, then 12, then 18. So this is where you can start having custom scores for different things. If you've got like a single coin and then a stack of 10 coins and then a bag of 100 coins, or you've got varying levels of health potion, things like that, this can allow you to have custom numbers. So I'll leave that as 6 for now. But another thing that we need to do, if you're like me and you like to see pickups that bob up and down in the world, so if yours is one that just lies on the ground, you can leave it as this, and that's fine. But if we want to have it where it bobs up and down and rotates, as some games do, we need to put in a timeline. So if you right-click anywhere empty and do Add Timeline, then I do Pickup Movement, I'll call it that. So a cool thing that you can do with timelines, if we open this up, there's a few options here. So we need to add a float track as first. So we need to add one that's an up-down, and we also need a flow of rotation. So 2 graphs here, one for rotation, one for up and down movement. But we can also do, so these options here, it allows us to do various things. So one's autoplay, so instead of having to link it up to a begin play to make it keep going through, we can just make it autoplay, so we can just have it launch from the start. And then also loop, so it'll keep looping it over and over again. So what we then need to do, we need to add up and down movement. So if I set that to 0 and 0 for the first frame, and then let's do it by 1 second for now, let's see if it's too fast, and we'll do a value of, let's say 50, so it bobs 50 units up, and then we need to make it go back down, otherwise it'll just keep snapping down, then going back up. So if I do that 2 seconds, then do that as 0, we can then see we've got a little pyramid looking thing. So if I drag select all of these keyframes now and do auto, it'll be a nice smooth bobbing up and down. Now what we need to do for the rotation, because we just want to rotate it 360 constantly, we want to do value as 0, 0 for the first one, then time is 2 seconds, so the last frame of this one. So I'm going to do it for 2 seconds, so I'm going to set the length to 2, and I'm going to set the value to 360, because it's going to be rotating a full 360 degrees, so then it's nice and smooth when it snaps back. So this is all we need for the rotation there, and this is all we need for the movement. So once we go back here, we can see up, down, float, and rotation float. So then if we do pickup mesh, and then do set relative location, put that to the update, and then split this, and then I believe it will be the z-axis that we need to move up and down. Yep. So then link that up to the z-axis on the up and down, so the location will make it move up and down, but then we also want a rotation. So if I do set relative rotation, link that up to this one, so it'll update onto the location, then through, and then onto the rotation as well. So if I split this, I know that I want to rotate the z-axis, I believe. So a nice little thing to make it neat, if you double click on one of these noodly type things, you then got what's called a reroute node. So you can then start to clean it up, because if we didn't have them, this line goes through this node and it's a bit hard to see. So if I'm going to add 2 in, so it's a nice little path around. So now when we have these in the world, put them to where they should be in the world first of all. And now they're bobbing up and down and rotating. So this might be a little bit too fast for some of you, so if you want to increase the time you can do, but then I can still pick them up and it's fine. So this is how to make a very basic pickup system with a debug that tells you what the current score is. Yeah, so you'd want this on eventually onto a menu, but for now, this is fine.